Hello, everyone. This is the first of a series of 5 podcasts that will take you through the revision session that we did last week, which was on the on Nazi Germany at war. Okay, and this first podcast will just take you through. It won't go into depth, but it will take you through the sort of key events that led to the outbreak of World War II, when Britain declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939. Okay, so there's the mind map for the whole of the revision session, and what we're going to be covering in this particular session then is this strand here, the causes of World War II. Okay, so we'll start off here. We'll start off as you go back to 1933-34. Okay, so as you the starting point obviously is that is that the Treaty of Versailles had seriously restricted Germany's military capability, and you need to just review those key terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And obviously, as you know, Hitler wanted to prepare for war, which he was planning to launch certainly by the early 1940s. So when he came to power in 1933, he was absolutely intent on revising the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, a couple of things to point out about that. Firstly, he needed to do it secretly. He couldn't just break the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Back in 1923, remember, Germany broke the terms of the Treaty of Versailles when they defaulted on paying reparations and the French invaded. So if he's too blatant about breaking the terms of the Treaty of Versailles by, for example, building up the German army, then he could find himself certainly at war with the French, and possibly also the British and the Americans, because they are the countries that imposed the Treaty of Versailles on Germany in 1919. And if he were to end up at war with these countries, then Germany would lose that war. Okay, so for example, the German army by the Treaty of Versailles was 100,000 men. The French army was at least 7 or 8 times bigger than that. The second point is, remember, Hitler did not really want to have a war in the West. Okay, his intentions lie with the East. So that would be a grave problem if he were to end up at war with France and Britain, because the key lesson from World War I, remember, is that Germany couldn't fight a war in 2 directions. Hitler's real ambitions, the reasons for rearming Germany and for building up the German army, was to wage a war for living space in the East, taking land in particular from Poland and from Russia. Okay, so those are the starting points. So we've got the issue there about secrecy and about rearmament. Okay, so remember, the German army was restricted to 100,000 men. Now, the occasion when Hitler really took his first risk, and it was a risk, he publicly announced in March 1935 that Germany was going to reintroduce conscription. That's the first thing. And secondly, that he was going to build up an air force. Now again, the Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany to have an air force. So that was a direct flouting of Versailles. And Germany, Hitler was taking a risk there that, strictly speaking, the French could have attacked, could have invaded, and they would have been justified to invade Germany because that was seen to be because that was a threatening move. But what Hitler always did is whenever he broke the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, he always followed it up by making a very strong point that his intentions were peaceful and were about just simply justice. So, for example, in this one, he said, I don't want to have to build up the German army. All I want to do is for Germany to be able to defend herself against other countries should we be attacked. So he was, in a sense, saying, what I want to do is for the French to lower their army, to reduce the size of their army. That would only be fair. Because the French were not prepared to do that, he presented Germany as a victim, saying, I need to rearm Germany, I need to build up the German army, not because I want war, but simply because we have a right to defend ourselves. Now, the next stage was the reoccupation of the Rhineland. Now, remember, the Rhineland had been demilitarised by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. You can see the Rhineland there. It's this area here. It was part of Germany. It wasn't taken away from Germany. Be careful not to make that mistake in the examination. But the Treaty of Versailles, to, in a sense, reassure France, had insisted that Germany not be allowed to keep any soldiers in the Rhineland area, that area of Germany that bordered with France. Now, on the 7th of March 1936, Hitler took his first really big gamble that could have provoked France to attack. He ordered his troops to move into the Rhineland, to occupy the Rhineland area. Now, Hitler realised the risk. He knew that if the French did attack, that Germany would lose. So he gave secret orders to the German army that if there was any sign of resistance from the French, Germany was to pull back immediately outside, pull back out of the Rhineland. There was no need for that to happen because the French did not resist. Why did the French not resist? Well, because the French expected Britain to stand on her side. They expected Britain to support her, and Britain wasn't prepared to do that. There was a strong feeling in Britain by the early 1930s, by the mid-1930s, that Hitler was actually a good leader who was doing a lot of good for Germany. He'd crushed communism, he had restored the German economy, and Britain was a trading partner with Germany, and so on and so forth. The British government, mainly their interests were elsewhere. They were in Ireland. The big enemy, as far as the British were concerned, in the mid-1930s was Italy, and the Italian leader Mussolini was expanding in Africa, and Britain didn't really want to get involved in a continental war. And many people in Britain, as I say, convinced themselves that Hitler was actually doing good for Germany. Now, Hitler then kept quiet for a couple of years. He pushed really the boundaries far enough, and he wasn't prepared to take any more risks. As we know, the Olympic Games in the summer of 1936. But then, as we move into 1937, he became very, very much focused on. It almost became impatient, thinking, Germany now needs to really start thinking about that big drive eastwards. We've got to start preparing for that ultimate war against Russia, which Hitler was planning for the early 1940s. So thinking therefore in terms of steps, he began to think in terms of expanding Germany's frontiers eastwards. Now again, he used the same sort of technique. He believed that he could expand Germany's frontiers eastwards without actually having to go to war, because there was a lot of territory to the east that was occupied by that was populated by German people, but they were living in other countries. And what Hitler tried to do was present an argument that according to the terms of the Treaty of Versailles back in 1919, land was taken from Germany, or land should have been given to Germany that wasn't given to Germany because it was German speaking. And he argued that the frontiers of Europe in the east, Germany's borders with other countries needed to be redrawn so that German-speaking people in other countries would now be part of Germany. So he did this in 4 stages, and the map you're looking at here shows the sort of first 3 stages of that. First of all, down in the south you've got Austria. Now Austria was a German-speaking people. Many people in Austria, not all, but many people, remember Hitler himself was an Austrian, believed that Austria should be part of Germany, that it should be united with Germany. That effectively the frontiers of Germany should be redrawn so that Austria become part of Germany. And effectively in March 1938, Germany invaded Austria, but be careful with the word there. When they invaded Austria, it was unresisted. Many Austrians wanted their country to be part of Germany. Not all. The Austrian government itself protested, but they were too weak to resist. And again, the French and the British, the Allies, because they were preoccupied elsewhere and Britain didn't want to get involved in a European war, basically Hitler got away with it. Now that event is known as, and it's highlighted there, is known as the Anschluss. And I've highlighted that word there. okay, the Anschluss. Let's move back. Now then in the summer of 1938, moving into September 1938, objective number 2 here, Hitler focused in on this territory here. If you look at the country here, it's called Czechoslovakia in the middle of the map. And the border region of Czechoslovakia, this area here, is called the Sudetenland. And so basically what Hitler wanted to do was redraw the border of Czechoslovakia so that the Sudetenland became part of, that's the area in yellow, became part of Germany. Now Hitler took a big risk here because the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia was to fight to defend the Sudetenland. It was German speaking, but it was really, really important to them. It contained a lot of the Czech industry, for example, and if Czechoslovakia lost the Sudetenland, it would seriously weaken their country and their ability really to exist as a country. And so there was a long, prolonged crisis in the summer of 1938 in which it looked as if France and Britain would actually stand and defend Czechoslovakia, but at the very last minute in October 1938, Britain effectively accepted Hitler's arguments and said, no, we're not going to go to war against you, and effectively allowed Hitler to take the Sudetenland. So in October 1938, the Germans marched into the Sudetenland unopposed, and the Sudetenland became part of Germany. Now, if you look at the map of Germany that now exists, you can see that the frontiers have been drawn. Austria is now part of Germany. The Sudetenland is part of Germany. So Germany has very much expanded eastwards. And stuck in the middle was the remainder of Czechoslovakia, this bit here in the middle. And then in March 1939, Hitler just simply invaded Bohemia and Moravia. He incorporated, it became part of. So again, all of that was incorporated inside Germany. Now, he couldn't even argue that was German speaking because it wasn't. But what he did argue is that the Czechs were incapable of maintaining order in that part of the country, and there were Germans living within it, and therefore he had to go in to protect them for their own self-interest. But it was really obvious at that stage then that what Hitler was up to. It became very, very obvious. Again, if you look at the map, Germany has now expanded massively to the east. Hitler's very much preparing for the eastern invasion. So the British attitude now hardened because it was clear now what Hitler's next intention was. His next intention, number 4, was the Polish corridor. Now, again, just to highlight, the Polish corridor was this area here. Remember, Germany was physically divided into two. You can see that in the map. You've got the main Germany there, but you've got East Prussia, and it's separated by the Polish corridor, the bit in the middle. Now, basically, as we move into August, the summer of 1939, Hitler gave all the threats to the Polish government. He demanded that the Polish corridor be given to Germany. Poland said no, and so on the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded that part of Poland and seized the Polish corridor. Now again, don't want to get too much into the sort of details, but he did actually form a temporary agreement with Stalin in Russia, even though Russia was Germany's big enemy, and Stalin likewise invaded Poland from the east and seized some Polish land for Russia as well. And that kind of convinced Hitler that he needn't worry about foreign intervention, about Britain getting involved. But of course that was his big calculation. Britain had had enough. Britain could now see through Hitler's false promises that all he wanted to do was incorporate German people into Poland. They could see that he was about expanding Germany's power aggressively in Europe. And so basically on the 3rd of September 1939, against everything Hitler calculated and against everything that he wanted, Britain declared war on Germany, and so therefore World War II began on the 3rd of September 1939. So there, that map shows you the extent of Germany's power by that date, and there is the quick factual test and the answers on the next page. Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully that was useful for you. If you can now go on to the next podcast.